Welcome to this latest episode of Open World Chat. I'm John Odom, and my co-host is Leanne Allen. This time we are joined by Sean Branney and Andrew Leman of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, and I have been waiting for this conversation for ages. So welcome, you guys.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us. I feel I'm afraid you may be disappointed waiting for so long for such a conversation, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, so why don't you guys tell us a bit about the Lovecraft Historical Society and what you do and how long it's been in existence and all that fun stuff.
The H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society is the largest organization in the world of fans of the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The society was founded way back in the 1980s. We are an actual society. We have actual members from South Tasmania to northern Finland and a great many places in between. We actually have a brick and mortar headquarters here in Los Angeles, from which we do things, and we produce a wide variety of entertainment products for fans of H.P. Lovecraft.
We started off doing gaming. I personally never heard of H.P. Lovecraft until Sean invited me over to his house to play Call of Cthulhu, the classic tabletop role-playing game.
Oh, yeah.
And, I got hooked by it, and we were all theater kids, so we thought we could have even more fun doing a live-action version of it. And this was in the mid-1980s, before the internet existed. We had never heard of live-action role-playing, so we invented a whole way of doing it on our own, and that became so much fun, and we became ambitious, and eventually we were doing all the work of making short little films. So we figured we might as well make short little films, and things just kept growing from there. And now we make movies and audio books and audio dramas and all kinds of other Lovecraft related stuff directly based on and inspired by, and even in some cases adaptations of those classic Call of Cthulhu games.
It's pretty impressive, actually, what you all have done. That you've you sound like you kind of came from the same world I did, and you had this passion, and you built something really, really impressive to be proud of.
Our motto is "Ludo fore putavimus," which is the Latin for "we thought it would be fun." And that's really been our guiding ethic over the years. We've had a lot of fun playing in Lovecraft Sandbox, and our mission is just to share that fun. And so if we can let other people in on the good time we've been having, then huzzah, come on in.
Nice.
I guess I'm going to dive right into this question here. Although first, I just want to put out there that, to be clear, if anyone's listening who doesn't know about Lovecraft, and I don't know why you'd be listening if you didn't, but just in case, this is a guy who has influenced modern horror more than anyone. I mean, I want to say going all the way back to Wicker Man, but probably well before that. I mean, his relative contemporary Poe gets a lot of the literary love, but in terms of actual impact, Lovecraft is all over it. So he makes for an interesting topic all on his own, but we're going to get into maybe the stickier problem. Let's, or if it's a problem, stickier conversation. So let's go back to 2015, when the World Fantasy Award distanced itself, shall we say, from Lovecraft and its award. There were a lot of conversations that led up to that. There were a lot of conversations then about what a problematic personality this gentleman was. I'm guessing you all got a lot of the pushback, a lot of the questions starting then or right around then that led to the right up front discussion of art versus artist on your society's website. It must have been a tough time.
It wasn't that bad. I mean, we didn't really have, a ton of angry mobs with torches and pitchforks and things, shouting for anybody's head or anything like that. It is absolutely legitimately a thorny question, and people absolutely should bring it up and grapple with it. And, we definitely are not of the mind of going, oh, nothing to see here, sweep it under the rug, pretend it's not an issue, or pretending that the problem is with the people who may find Lovecraft objectionable as a figure. I think people are well within their rights. Some people to find him objectionable as a figure, as a lot of people in history are objectionable. For the people, my personal view was if you're the World Fantasy Convention and you don't want a figure or don't feel a certain historical figure is a great representation of your organization, well, it's your organization. They were well within their rights to change it and find something or someone who was a better represented what they wanted and needed to do. So I'll start with that. Andrew?
Yeah, we certainly have heard from any number of people. And we certainly have heard from any number of people, since 2015 and before, who've asked us, how can you possibly, promote or celebrate the works of H.P. Lovecraft? He was a horrible racist. He was a terrible person. And, like Sean said, we recognize he was a racist. We're not saying he wasn't. But pretending he didn't exist or trying to forget about him he also, in addition to being a racist, he also was an amazing creator and created a whole fascinating world that's fun to play in. And by continuing to play in that world and acknowledging the racism that he felt, he's part and parcel of the early 20th century in American history. And it's, those are issues that have to be looked at, not swept under the rug. So, trying to get rid of him doesn't solve the problem of racism. And ultimately, he's dead. We can't change Lovecraft. He does not profit from his terrible views. He can't grow. He can't change. We can't fix him. But what matters is not what Lovecraft thought about racism. What matters is what we think. Those of us who are still alive and can do something about it. What matters is what we think of racism. So looking at how Lovecraft felt about it and how it informed his writing and how it informed the writing of other people that he influenced, that's still worth doing because we all have to learn some lessons from his life.
And that actually leads me to what was going to be my first question, which is, have you noticed a change in the way people play games, in the way people do tribute movies or, shorts or whatever, in light of 2015? Like, has there been a shift since then that is more cognizant, more aware of the racism trap?
And I mean, 2015 is obviously sort of an arbitrary benchmark.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't really tie it to 2015, but certainly, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been a across the board, I think, in Western culture, we've seen people becoming simply more cognizant of the issues of, misogyny and racism and xenophobia, and, lots of these trends are manifesting themselves. And, the little Lovecraft corner of the world has certainly seen, and I think it's seen a reaction against his racism, which has manifested itself primarily in an intent for greater inclusivity and greater diversity. So you see projects like Matt Ruff's novel and the subsequent HBO series of Lovecraft Country, where a company the size of, HBO, which is, part of Warner Brothers, steps up and says, yeah, we're going to tackle this, and we're going to tackle it through the lens of a project that combines, in the history of racial injustice in the United States with this supernatural horror element that's also tied to Lovecraft. You see companies like Chaosium, the publisher of the role-playing game Call of Cthulhu, doing great, new supplements like Harlem Unbound, which suddenly is putting African-American culture and history and protagonists and heroes and stories right in the front and center world of the game Call of Cthulhu. They've reworked, some of their older things that were published back in the 80s to just look at them afresh and go, is the way we're telling this story going to make everybody feel inclusive? Or can we retool our things to gain a wider audience and better represent the people who we would like to see playing our game are represented in the game itself?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you went right to Lovecraft Country, which of course we were going to talk about. The conversation, I was involved in some of these conversations the last few years, because I actually, to be honest, I didn't know about Lovecraft's, racist opinions. And I mean, let's be honest, it's particularly tricky when you're talking about him, because that just man of his time argument doesn't really work. He was worse. He was kind of racist even by the time, and that makes the argument so raw and naked, but also pure. And now, so I've been in those polarized conversations, and been in the, do I have to justify my appreciation for this artist? Should I even have an appreciation for this artist? But here comes Lovecraft Country, which actually brings the work and the ideas, not him, his actual work, into a greater conversation that is really a progressive one. I mean, it is a little bit subversive, but so what? It's still folded in. That must have changed your all's lives.
No, I don't really know that it. I think it actually had less of an impact than we thought it would when we were hearing about it as a theory, rather than seeing what was ultimately actually what the show actually was in execution. One thing I'd love to go back to, though, in what you just said, which is, I think Lovecraft, as there is the argument, he's a man of his times, and certainly, the 20s and 30s racism was much more common and prevalent in the time. But I think it's also worth knowing with Lovecraft, although he did certainly express his views on race, he really expressed them in private to his friends and family through his correspondence. There are a great many public figures of the 20s and 30s who are promoting racism and the Klan and lynchings and lots of, actually encouraging people to violent acts, which is not at all what Lovecraft was about. He had opinions about racial superiority that were inspired by some of the dubious anthropology of his age. But he certainly, he is not publicly fomenting racism and trying to bring about harm to anyone. He just simply had strongly held opinions and beliefs about, that races could and should be categorized and weighed against one another.
Mm-hmm.
That his views, found expression in his fiction. It's implicit in a lot of it and explicit in some of it. And the stuff that he intended to publish does contain, racist influences. But as Sean was saying, he never, some of the essays that he wrote when he was younger in the amateur journalism movement were pretty heinously racist. But as he aged, he got at least a little bit wiser. He was a racist to the end of his days, but I think he grew as a human being, and that's as much as anybody can be asked to do, is grow as a human being. And like Sean said, he was not out there, actively promoting racism in public. He was very opinionated in what he considered to be private correspondence. And the fact that we've all now read all the stuff that, he never intended us to read, that's another part of the puzzle when it comes to H.P. Lovecraft. We know more about him than I'm sure he wishes we did.
Yeah, it's a magnifying glass that gets held up to him that, honestly, most authors and other thinkers are spared because nobody else is the most voluminous writer of correspondence in American history. So there's a lot to know about Howard in his own words because he wrote such a massive quantity of, correspondence.
Yeah, it's interesting. He did have, as Andrew was mentioning in some of his early works, they were quite explicit and quite bad. There's a poem whose name I won't even mention because it contains the N-word. But I'm wondering if the changes in Lovecraft's overall outlook are visible within his correspondence over time? Or does he seem to chill out or calm down a little bit? He was quite virulent, apparently, when in the very early years, like 1912 through 1920. Is there any sign of the virulence kind of fading as he gets older?
I think it depends on the specific issue in mind. If you really read all his letters, you watch a man grow up from a very coddled childhood and, somebody who's got a fierce intellect, but a very, very narrow worldview of the Lovecraft of the 19 teens. And then, has the death of his mother and getting married and moving to New York in the 20s, which, certainly opens his eyes to a lot of the world which he had never seen, to the Lovecraft of the 30s, which is then a guy in fairly dire economic straits, grappling with the Great Depression and watching the world grapple with the Great Depression. And so him as the, 1914, 1915 author of a magazine called The Conservative, when you read his letters from, 1933, 1934, where he's really understanding, certainly in terms of political and economic theory, a much more complicated world and presenting a much more compassionate view to the fact that the whole world is suffering under what's going on in the 1930s. So,
while we're talking, I'm just sort of thinking to myself how it was, and I just wonder if you all had this experience too. Sounds like we're sort of all of an age, was really into the whole Cthulhu thing when I was young. I would look for influences, movies where those influences would be there, or read old, like, Challenges of the Unknown comics where they're kind of lifting stuff. And for me, it was more recently in life, but this controversy, this, even maybe the concept of art versus artist didn't occur to me for a long time. And then I had it presented to me. I had what we're talking about and the views and some of the writings of this guy presented to me. And I don't want to overstate it, but it was a real personal moment. What do I do with this now that I know this? Am I allowed to like this guy still? And, I don't know. Did you all have sort of moments like that where you really had to be presented with it and you had to wrestle with it?
I certainly have been confronted with things like that, more and more recently. We're all on Zoom so we can see each other. And so I can say, here we are, 4 white people talking about this issue,
right.
And it's like, we've had the luxury of going our whole lives without this ever occurring to us because of our privileged status as the default human being. We might all have a very different perspective on these issues if we were not in the privileged position that we're in. And that has certainly been driven home to me a lot lately. We've recently been, learning more and more horrific facts about the Tulsa massacre of 1921. And that's a thing that, no one in America was taught in school. It's only because of Lovecraft Country and Watchmen that most people currently know that ever even happened. So, that's another sort of argument for why abandoning Lovecraft isn't necessarily a good thing, because, it's through Lovecraft Country that we're becoming more aware of some of these issues that some of us are. I'm defaulting to us, like there is an us, It's been eye-opening, certainly for me, and I think for a lot of other people, things that a certain segment of our population has been painfully aware of for a long time, and that, I, for one, am only recently coming to really fully appreciate. Yeah.
I think, too, for everybody has to make a personal decision about whether any thinker or writer or artist's contribution outweighs any personal moral objection they may have. And, I as a comparison, often point people towards, what are you going to do with Thomas Jefferson? Try and not say the man's an important thinker and a massive influence on Western civilization. You really can't. And on the whole, most people seem to be lining up with, well, his contributions to our civilization outweigh the fact that he owned slaves. You could say, yeah, Lovecraft's a racist, and that's not a good thing. But being a slave owner is, I think, even more problematic. And in terms of how we embrace or shun a public figure like Jefferson, it's a really thorny issue. And where do you draw the lines? Shakespeare's pretty problematic. And on the whole, culturally, we seem to have gone, he's okay. He wrote these plays and they are so good. They are worth, some of the really very, very ugly beliefs, which were part of him and part of his culture. And they are baked into those works. And if you're really going to grapple with those plays, you got to really grapple with those kinds of issues too. I think it is a personal choice. And that's one other thing we also like, to point out. Andrew and I aren't running a school board or anything like that. We're not forcing anybody to read Lovecraft. We're not saying it should be curriculum. We're just saying, this is material. We've enjoyed it. We've come to terms with it. We believe other people could, but hey, if it's not for you, it doesn't need to be for you. And we're not trying to suggest it's for everybody. And we ourselves, are deliberately working now in some of the things that we're producing to widen, inclusivity and diversity in the casts of the things we're producing, and just thinking about, these issues. And as I think I mentioned, the Chaosium, the game company, was trying to make the games more inclusive to a wider audience who might, find the material more enjoyable if they were reflected in it. We got, we're hearing the message that's out there that is going, yeah, let's go for wide inclusivity and invite everybody in, and anybody who wants to stay we'll try and be as welcoming as we can. And anybody who doesn't care for it and wants to go, absolutely. We do get it.
Make sure. Go ahead.
Kind of, I was going to say, and along sort of similar lines to, what's been done with Lovecraft Country, as well as, making games more inclusive. I've seen people kind of in the literary realm, how should I phrase this, creating almost revenge versions of the stories.
Yeah.
So, this is a terribly misogynist story, so we're going to change it, and we're going to make a non-misogynist version of it. I think maybe part of the discussion around it is creating new cultural contexts that are more inclusive, but that derive some of the good parts, the inventiveness and, the special circumstances and, the realms, etc.
Sure, I think that's a great reaction. That's like, cultural jujitsu. Turn the racism against itself. Use it to point out, rather than sweep the racism under the rug, point it out and investigate. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, we've been trying to do that here and see, other people doing it in fiction and in music and a variety of sources, and think it's great. It's high time, and it can take it, I think these stories being told from new perspectives and flipping racism on its head or misogyny on its head, you can still tell a story that's Lovecraftian and not have it be about old white guys, in the way that the original Lovecraft stories were.
Yes, everyone will always be able to relate to sort of deeply disturbing and horrific. It's something we all have together
than human beings. So, absolutely.
I think Liane is going to know where I'm going with this. The examples you named, folks like Shakespeare. Who else did you mention? Oh, Jefferson, right? These are folks in the past. These are essentially historical characters. They've been put into sort of a cultural archive. And I think that's also true of H.P. Lovecraft. Do you think there is a whole different approach to this whole discussion, this whole art versus artist discussion, if the figure is not historical? if they're more current? Is there a different set of eyes you need for that? Could someone, be comfortable with Lovecraft, Shakespeare, Jefferson, but then look at Joss Whedon and basically say, screw this guy. I'm not watching any more Buffy or the Nevers ever again. How does that fit in? How does the contemporary versus historical fit in?
Well, I have an answer that applies only to myself, and I would never dream of telling anybody else how to think or live their lives. I do think that there is a difference between someone like a Lovecraft who's dead and cannot be changed and someone who is alive and profiting from his or her creative work. And if people who want to boycott Lovecraft, I get it, but at the same time, I don't see what it accomplishes. People who want to boycott Joss Whedon, that I can see that if that changes the way Joss Whedon thinks or the opportunities that Joss Whedon has, that might accomplish something. So for me, there would be a difference in how you handle someone who is still alive and working and someone who isn't. But again, like I said, that's how I think of it, and I wouldn't tell anybody else how to think of it.
Yeah, I think we as consumers, both literally of financially of goods as well as consumers of intellectual property, are always making decisions about what we endorse or don't endorse, and we buy stuff at this big box store because we believe in what side they're aligned with, and we don't ever go to that store because we don't believe in that. And I think Andrew's right that, it's certainly a more relevant decision if a creator is still creating and there's someone there to hear the message, the endorsement or the rejection message that's being sent. It goes more loudly, but, at the end of the day, whether they are alive or not, are choosing to embrace or distance ourselves from anybody, those are the decisions we make. And, that's how our own behavior, how it manifests itself as a reflection of our own underlying ideals. So
do you all, and, I'm not going to talk about my own opinions or dog. Oh, sure I will. I love a lot of Joss Whedon's work there. Do you all think at any level, sort of stepping back, it's a little unfair to judge, contemporary folks like that more harshly for, perhaps less harsh, depending on who you talk to, actions? Well, it's not less harsh in this particular case, but let's imagine that somebody is less harsh. I mean, are we going to assign the same standard? Well, I'm babbling here. We're already sort of putting out there that these two types of situations, the historical versus the contemporary, can and should be judged differently. Stepping back historically, is that fair? Is that fair to the current artist?
I'm not sure I entirely understand your question, but I would say, I might say that, someone in the present day ought to know better at this point. Mm-hmm. So I'm perfectly comfortable personally judging a contemporary person more harshly because, in my opinion, they ought to know better by now. Mm-hmm. But, that's how I see it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think, they exist in the same world that we exist in versus, the Lovecraft lived in a different world and Shakespeare lived in a different world, and that time has come and passed. But, we are probably in the most homogenized world in the history of the world, in that, it doesn't matter where you live, because of the internet, because of the media, we all are having relatively, comparable experiences and are able to be well informed about, the forces at work around us. And then it's like, well, is somebody choosing to be oblivious, or are they actually oblivious? I don't know, and that becomes a decision that we have to make in evaluating, a writer or creator or whatever the person might be.
Yeah. So many of these, a lot of racism, I think, you can either attribute it to malice or you can attribute it to ignorance. And at this point in the state of the world, I can't believe that a person like Joss Whedon is ignorant. So the only thing that's left is malice. So that's all I can think, not to call out Joss Whedon personally, but a person in this day and age just there's much less excuse for ignorance nowadays. And certainly if a person of goodwill learns the truth, then it's hard to justify ongoing racist thoughts and actions. To me, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I concur with John that I really like a lot of Joss Whedon's work. At the same time, being a female in this culture and seeing some of the things that he has done and hearing about some of the things that he has done, I have absolutely no patience for that. He has no excuse, and I am done.
Super. I saw the previews for The Nevers, and I thought, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to watching it. I didn't know that Joss Whedon had anything to do with it until the closing credits of the first episode. Because, they did not publicize his involvement, which was an interesting commercial decision on their part. Because normally, Joss Whedon is a name that sells tickets. And to deliberately prevent his name from being affiliated with the show until you just have to reveal that, yeah, he was one of the creators of this show. It's like, oh, wow, that in and of itself says a lot. And it did, I have to admit, it changed I went ahead and watched the rest of the series because I did enjoy it. It was gorgeous, but it did change the way I looked at the rest of the series once I knew who was involved. Yeah.
Interesting. So you had that sort of pure moment of here is the art without that connection, which is
that isn't that I, for at least that pilot episode, I couldn't separate the art from the artist because I didn't know who the artist was. I just knew that car is awesome, and this looks like a fun world to spend an hour in once or twice a week. And then you get to the closing credits, go, oh, and then it changes how you look at all those characters.
Now, be honest, you guys never thought that we would be having a discussion about Joss Whedon when you signed on, right?
No.
No, but that's all right.
It fits. I mean, it's thematic. There's, contemporary. Well, anyway. Well, Liane, did you have any more questions, or should we just pester these guys about what they're working on now? Because
let's pester these guys about what they're working on now.
Yeah, what are you guys doing? You've got you keep busy, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we've got a pretty full docket going at the moment. So we've been doing for more than a decade now a series of 1930 style radio plays of Lovecraft's work, done as if they had been adapted back in the day. So we just earlier today, we're like 98% of the way done recording, our 26th episode of that? 25th? 20?
It depends on if you count the Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar as a separate episode or not. If you don't, then this is number 25. If you do it for 26.
Wait, that's the wrong guy. That's the wrong guy.
I know.
Yeah, we dusted off Poe for one. But so we've got one title that we've just recorded. We'll be coming out with later this summer. Then we have another big, complicated dark adventure audio project, which hopefully will be coming out sometime late this year. We're in the midst of recording another audiobook. We got some fun game stuff coming down the pipeline. We got a couple other secret new audio things that we're working on. Audio has been very good to us. Audio in a lot of ways, and Lovecraft is a suitable marriage. I think that taking away the element of sight and letting it play upon a listener's imagination tends to work well with this kind of material. So we've been doing quite a lot on that front.
We also are working on a book project, and a couple of other. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all the things we're currently working on, and distressing to think that so many of the deadlines are so soon.
The year is almost half over. How about that?
Yeah. That's true. I appreciate you all picked the Poe piece that I would have picked as someone a little more Lovecraft oriented. I don't think that's a coincidence.
We just thought it was very well suited for radio, so that was what led us to that one. But we may circle back around to do another Poe one subsequently, because there are a few other Poe stories that would make I think for listening. So.
Absolutely.
Now, continuing along with the theme, if money were no object and time were no object, is there something you absolutely wish you could do that you simply can't with current limitations?
Well, we've got a couple relatively large, both motion picture and television projects that if money and time weren't problems, I think we would like to be making them, just simply to, get back to our mission of sharing the fun with a wider audience, and we think some of these stories are pretty terrific and could really be enjoyable if we have the means to execute them right. So we're chasing down things as people in this business have to chase down things, but I think those would be high on my list. Andrew, I don't know. What do you got?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're a little shy of announcing titles and stuff just because these are things that we've had in the works in one form or another for a long time. And we just want to play our cards close to the vest in the hope that some of that money and time actually comes our way and we can actually see them through. So, yeah, the titles that I would use to answer your question, I'm not going to say just because I actually have hopes that they'll come to pass.
Now, another thing, are you familiar with Critical Role? It's a podcast where people basically, okay.
Yeah.
We are.
We've heard of
imagine people playing board games essentially would be something that becomes a multi-million-dollar thing.
Yes.
Life is strange. But yes, we're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch the way, that gaming and filmed entertainment have collided in a way that, 5-6 years ago, I just would not have predicted that people would want to go online and watch other people play Dungeons and Dragons. The people coming on virtual gaming spaces make more sense to me to, instead of having to get people around your kitchen table, meet via the computer and play with people from all over the world. But to passively watch other people play games is it's taken me a while to wrap my brain around that, and it's not a small thing; it's a big thing now.
But then again, I'm not a particular sports fan, and I've always felt the same thing about football. It's like, why do I want to watch these guys play a game of football? I don't, but clearly a lot of people will spend their entire weekend doing it. So I guess in some ways it shouldn't be surprising that there are a lot of people who like watching other people play a role-playing game. There are a lot of people who like watching people play sports. So I guess it makes sense. And
there is an unfolding story. It's story-driven,
Yeah.
Which, a football game is, I suppose you could call it a very simple and short story, but to watch people game and people who are good at it engage in a complicated, improvised or quasi-improvised story is.
Yeah, I guess where you don't know what's going to happen next. That's part of what the appeal must be, is that you don't know what's going to happen next, and that applies to both traditional sports and gaming as a spectator sport.
Yeah, sure. It's the same reflex.
Yeah,
same drive.
But yeah, it never would have occurred to me. The thought of having come from, enjoying playing those games so much, the thought of watching other people play Dungeons and Dragons or even Call of Cthulhu, it never would have occurred to me. Which, much to my regret, I wish we had thought of it a little sooner. All credit to the people who created Critical Role. Good luck to them, and they deserve the success that they've had.
Well, listen, you guys, thanks. I'm sure you have to have this conversation probably more than you'd like to. You'd rather just sort of, get into the work and be in the work and talk to others. But I really appreciate you having it with us. It's been a blast.
Well, thanks to both of you. It's, some of it obviously is a joy to talk about, and some of it is heartbreaking and hard, but we're always glad to have the conversation.
And it is important. And I think the fact that, you guys are bringing it up, it is absolutely a worthy topic. And I think, for people who are into genre entertainment, it's something you got to grapple with and understand the sources and understand, how how those artists of the past fit into the contemporary experience. So,
all right. Well, I guess we'll let you go so you can salvage a little bit. Oh, you have more of the weekend than we do, right? You're 3 hours.
We got 3 more hours.
Yeah, you got 3 more hours. Yeah.
Live it up, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Going to the grocery store.
All right. Well, you all have fun at the grocery store, and I'm going to keep an eye on your projects.
All right. Thanks so much, you guys. Take care.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
This was great.
Our theme music is by Christopher Piatti.